I found out that my younger sister had sold my late mother's engagement ring just so she could afford a designer handbag for a party. And when I confronted her, she laughed and told me I was being dramatic because Mom would have wanted her to look good. Have you ever looked at someone you've shared your entire life with and realized they are a complete stranger with no soul? I need you to listen to this and tell me, honestly, was I the villain for what I did next, or did she finally get exactly what she deserved? People tell me family is everything, but after what happened over the last few months, I think some family members are just parasites wearing a familiar face. To understand how we got to the point where I had to dismantle my sister's entire life, you have to understand who Chloe is. Chloe is 5 years younger than me, and from the moment she was born, she was the miracle baby. Our parents had struggled to conceive her, and because of that, she was never told the word no. While I was working a part-time job at 16 to save for my first beat-up car, Chloe was getting a brand new Jeep for her 16th birthday just because she cried that the bus was embarrassing. My parents weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable, and they poured every extra cent into Chloe's whims. I moved out at 18, worked my way through college, and built a successful career in real estate. Chloe, on the other hand, stayed home. She dabbled in being an influencer, which really just meant spending my parents' retirement money on clothes and aesthetic coffee shops while gaining 0 followers. When our mother passed away 2 years ago, things got worse. My dad was heartbroken and checked out emotionally, which gave Chloe free rein to manipulate him. She convinced him to sell our childhood home and move into a smaller condo, pocketing the moving expenses, which she actually spent on a trip to Tulum. I tried to warn my dad, but he just said, "She's grieving in her own way, let her be." The dynamic in our house was always tilted. I remember one Christmas when I was 21. I had saved up to buy Mom a beautiful cashmere scarf. Chloe, who had forgotten to buy anything, literally took the gift out of my hands, wrapped it in her own paper, and presented it to Mom as if she'd spent her last dime on it. When I tried to speak up, Mom just pulled me aside and said, "Let her have this win, she's been having a hard time at school." That was the theme of our lives. Chloe's hard times always outweighed my hard work. As Chloe got older, her entitlement morphed into something darker. She started viewing the family's assets as her own personal bank account. She would take Dad's credit card for emergencies that turned out to be $500 brunch dates with friends who didn't even like her. I watched as my father's hair turned gray from the stress of her constant demands, yet he could never bring himself to cut the cord. It wasn't just the money, it was the psychological toll. Chloe had this way of making you feel like you were the crazy one for having boundaries. If I didn't let her borrow my designer shoes, I was selfish. If I didn't drive 3 hours to pick her up because she was too hungover to drive her own Jeep, I didn't care about her safety. She weaponized our mother's death more than anyone. Every time she wanted something, she'd bring up how Mom would have wanted me to have a nice life. It was a constant cycle of emotional blackmail that left me exhausted, and my father broke. I remember a specific instance 6 months ago when she asked me for a small loan of $5,000 to launch a skincare line. When I asked to see a business plan, she threw a glass of water at me and screamed that I was jealous of her potential. That was the person I was dealing with, a ticking time bomb of narcissism and greed. The breaking point started last month. My mother's only request in her will was that her jewelry be split between us. Most of it was costume jewelry, but there was one piece that mattered. Her grandmother's 5-carat diamond ring. It was supposed to be mine because I was the eldest and the one who actually cared for her during her hospice days. I was the one who changed her bandages, who sat with her through the night when the pain was too much, and who held her hand when she took her last breath. Chloe was usually too overwhelmed to visit the hospital, often posting sad selfies from a spa instead. Chloe had already taken the necklaces and earrings, so I kept the ring in a small safe in my apartment. I told her clearly that the ring was off limits. It wasn't about the money. It was the only thing I had that felt like a piece of my mother's soul. But Chloe didn't see a soul. She saw a price tag. She saw a way to climb the social ladder. She had been invited to this Gala of the season, an event filled with local celebrities and high-end designers. She was desperate to fit in, and her influencer bank account was sitting at a cool $12. 2 weeks ago, Chloe came over to bond. She was being unusually sweet, talking about how much she missed Mom and how she wanted us to be closer. She even brought over my favorite takeout. I fell for it. I actually thought, for one fleeting moment, that my sister was finally growing up. I left her alone in my living room for 20 minutes while I took an urgent work call in the other room regarding a closing. When I came back, she was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, looking perfectly innocent. After she left, I didn't think twice until the following morning. I went to get the ring out to take it to a jeweler for a professional cleaning and appraisal for insurance. The safe was cracked open. I must have left it unlocked after checking some property deeds earlier that morning. And the ring was gone. My heart stopped. I checked every corner of that safe, hoping I had just misplaced it, but the velvet box was empty. I called her immediately, my voice shaking, and she didn't even try to hide it. She told me she needed the money for a career-defining fashion event and that since I was rich anyway, I didn't need the inheritance. She'd sold it to a shady pawn shop in the city for a fraction of its value. A ring worth $30,000 sold for $6,000 just because she needed it now. I was shaking. I was seeing red. I told her I was going to the police, and she laughed. She literally laughed in my face and said, "Dad will never let you put me in jail, and besides, I already spent the money on my dress and the entry fee. It's gone. Get over it, sis. It's just a rock." That was the moment something inside me snapped. I realized that as long as Chloe was protected by her spoiled princess bubble, she would continue to destroy everything precious to me. She had no remorse, no empathy, and no respect for the woman who gave her life. So that is the mess I was dealing with. My own sister stole a priceless family heirloom and mocked our dead mother's memory just for a handbag and a party. I had a choice. I could cry about it and let her win, or I could make sure she never dared to touch something of mine again. I realized that if I just called the cops, Dad would pay her bail, hire her a lawyer, and she'd be back to her old tricks in a week. No, this required something more surgical. It required a total collapse of her carefully constructed fantasy world. Before I tell you the absolute chaos I unleashed on her life to get my revenge, I want you to pause right now. Go down to the comments and tell me, what would you have done? Would you have called the cops immediately, or would you have handled it personally? I really want to know if you think I went too far with what happens next. I started by doing some deep digging into Chloe's influencer life. I hired a private investigator friend to look into her brand deals. It turns out it was all a lie. She had been faking her entire lifestyle. She was renting designer clothes from apps and returning them damaged, taking photos in luxury hotel lobbies she wasn't staying in. And most importantly, she had been borrowing money from several of our cousins and even our elderly Aunt Martha. She promised them all that she was about to sign a huge 6-figure brand deal with a major makeup company, and would pay them back tenfold. I contacted every single one of them. I set up a group chat and told them exactly what she did to Mom's ring. The outrage was instant. Aunt Martha started crying because she had given Chloe her medication money. My anger turned into a cold, hard resolve. I realized Chloe wasn't just a spoiled girl. She was a predator who viewed everyone around her as a resource to be consumed. I spent the next 48 hours gathering evidence. I contacted the brand she claimed to be working with. Surprise, surprise, they had never heard of her. In fact, they were a small boutique firm that was horrified to find out she was using their name to scam elderly relatives. I also reached out to the pawn shop. The owner was a greasy guy who tried to act like he'd done nothing wrong, but when I mentioned the words, receiving stolen property and police report, his tune changed. He told me he'd already sent the diamond to a wholesaler, but I knew he was lying. I could see the glint of my mother's ring in his display case, marked up to triple what he paid Chloe. I didn't buy it back then. I needed the evidence to stay exactly where it was for a moment. But that was just the beginning. I knew Chloe's big event was a high-profile gala for a local charity, where she was trying to network with actual wealthy socialites. She had spent the ring money on a custom gown that cost more than my first 3 cars. I found out which boutique she bought it from. Since I've done real estate work for the owner, I managed to get a copy of the receipt and the contract. She hadn't paid for it in full. She had put down a massive deposit, the ring money, and was on a predatory payment plan she could never afford. I also found out she had lied on her application for the gala, claiming she was the owner of my real estate firm to get onto the VIP list. She had even printed fake business cards with my logo and her name as CEO. On the night of the gala, I didn't stop her from going. I let her spend 3 hours on hair and makeup. I let her get all dressed up in that stolen glamour dress. I let her take her fake life photos in the back of an Uber Black she couldn't afford. Then I showed up. I didn't make a scene. I simply walked up to the organizers and the boutique owner who was also in attendance. I presented the police report I had filed quietly that morning for the stolen ring, along with the actual articles of incorporation for my business, proving that the business she claimed to own was actually mine, and she was never even an employee. I showed the boutique owner the police report, explaining that the deposit used for the dress was stolen funds. The fallout was spectacular. Within 30 minutes, security approached her while she was in the middle of trying to charm a group of actual investors. They escorted her out of the ballroom in front of everyone she was trying to impress. She was screaming, her fake eyelashes peeling off as she cried, demanding they let her go. But I wasn't done. While she was being kicked out, I had already spoken to my father. I didn't just tell him. I showed him the bank statements of the money she had been siphoning from his account over the last year. Over $40,000 hidden in service fees and subscription transfers I discovered when I helped him with his taxes. I showed him the messages from Aunt Martha. I showed him the photos of her in Tulum while he was struggling to pay for his heart medication. The look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated heartbreak, but also, for the first time in years, clarity. He realized his miracle baby was a monster he had helped create. My father was devastated. He sat in his chair and just stared at the wall for a long time. But finally, the wool was pulled from his eyes. He realized that his miracle baby was a predator. He cut her off completely that night. He changed the locks on his condo, froze the joint credit card she used, and called her car lease company to surrender the Jeep she hadn't paid a cent for. Chloe called me at 3 a.m., screaming from the sidewalk, sobbing that I had ruined her life over a stupid piece of metal. She had been kicked out of her apartment because she was 4 months behind on rent, thinking she could use the gala to find a rich husband to pay her debts. I told her that the stupid metal was the last thing I had of our mother, and now the last thing she had was the truth. The aftermath was even more brutal than the night of the gala. Chloe tried to launch a cancellation campaign against me on social media, crying to her handful of bot followers about how her evil sister was jealous of her success. But I was ready. I posted the screenshots of the bank transfers, the police report, and a testimonial from Aunt Martha. The few real followers she had turned on her instantly. She was banned from the boutique. The gala organizers put her on a permanent blacklist for fraud, and the pawn shop owner, fearing a lawsuit, eventually returned the ring to me for the original price he paid her, just to make me go away. I eventually tracked down the ring at the pawn shop. It took a lot of legal threats and a bit more cash than she sold it for, but I bought it back with my own savings. It's back in the safe, and this time, the code has been changed and the safe is bolted to the floor in a room she will never enter again. Chloe ended up having to move into a tiny studio in a bad part of town, working a grueling retail job at a discount clothing store, the kind of place she used to mock. She has no car, no designer bags, and no father to bail her out. Our entire extended family has blocked her. She tries to post on social media about toxic family, but nobody likes or shares her posts anymore. She's a ghost in the world she tried so hard to conquer. The most satisfying part wasn't the ring though. It was seeing my father reclaim his life. Without Chloe draining him, he started traveling again, reconnecting with old friends, and actually smiling for the first time since Mom passed. He realized that enabling her wasn't love. It was a slow-motion car crash. As for Chloe, she recently sent me a long, rambling email asking for forgiveness and a small bridge loan to help her get back on her feet. I didn't reply. I simply blocked her email address. I realized that some people don't change because they can't. They only apologize when they run out of victims. Looking back, I don't feel a single ounce of guilt. Sometimes, the only way to teach a spoiled person a lesson is to let the world they built on lies come crashing down on their head. You cannot build a life on the backs of the people who love you and expect the structure to hold. She needed to learn that actions have consequences, and that family isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card for being a terrible human being. It took losing everything for her to realize she never had anything real to begin with. She thought she was the main character in a movie, but she forgot that every villain eventually meets their ending. If you think I did the right thing by standing up for my mother's memory and putting an end to her entitlement, hit that like button right now. It helps me know I'm not crazy for being this fed up with her behavior. If you want to hear more stories about people finally getting what's coming to them, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. I'm reading every single comment, so let me know your final thoughts on this whole mess below. Did she deserve a second chance? Or was this the only way she would ever learn? I'll see you all in the next story.